The Vorthok armada was like a giant storm moving through space, destroying everything in its path. For 3 long months, they had swept through the galaxy like hungry wolves. 17 star systems had fallen to their might, 17 worlds had watched their suns dim as the alien warships blocked out the light. Admiral Zektar stood in his command center, his 6 arms moving across control panels with practiced ease. His yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he stared at the blue-green planet ahead. Earth looked so small, so helpless, just another rock floating in space, waiting to be crushed under his fleet's power. Another primitive world, he muttered to his officers. These humans don't even have proper space defenses. We'll be done before lunch. The Vorthok fleet was massive, 300 warships, each one bigger than a city. Their dark hulls bristled with weapons that could crack planets in half. They had never lost a battle, never even come close to losing one. Zektar's lieutenant, a smaller alien with nervous twitches, approached his commander. Sir, our scouts report that the humans have only basic technology. Chemical rockets, primitive satellites. They're still fighting wars with each other on their planet's surface. Perfect, Zektar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Easy prey. Signal the fleet to prepare for planetary bombardment. We'll finish this quickly and move on to the next system. But as the words left his mouth, something impossible happened. Space itself began to change. At first, it was just a shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Then the shimmer grew stronger, twisting and bending until it looked like someone was tearing a hole in the fabric of reality itself. The stars around that spot began to stretch and warp, as if they were being pulled into something that shouldn't exist. What in the void is that? Zektar's voice cracked with the first hint of concern he'd felt in years. His officers scrambled at their stations, sensors going crazy with readings that made no sense, energy signatures that shouldn't be possible, dimensional distortions that their best scientists said were impossible. Then, from that impossible tier in space, something emerged. The human warship Phoenix Dawn slid into normal space like a ghost becoming solid. It was huge, nearly as large as Zektar's flagship, but it moved with a grace that seemed to mock the laws of physics. Its hull was a deep blue-black, almost like the night sky itself, and strange patterns of light danced across its surface. What made it truly terrifying wasn't its size or its strange appearance. It was how calm it seemed. While the Vorthok fleet bristled with weapons and aggressive posturing, the human ship just floated there, peaceful, patient, like a sleeping giant that knew it had nothing to fear. Inside the Phoenix Dawn, Captain Honwoo Kim stood on his bridge with the kind of calm that comes from having seen too much. He was a man in his 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes that had witnessed horrors across multiple realities. His uniform was simple, practical, without the medals and decorations that alien commanders loved to display. Sir Lieutenant Miran Park called from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with the sharp intelligence of someone who had graduated top of her class at the Space Academy. Her fingers danced across holographic controls as she monitored the alien fleet's communications. They're demanding a surrender, standard intimidation tactics, threats of orbital bombardment, demands for unconditional submission. Honwoo nodded slowly, straightening his uniform with the casual gesture of a man adjusting his tie before a business meeting. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. No panic, no shouting orders, no dramatic speeches. Just professionals, doing their jobs. Any response from command? He asked. No, sir, Miran replied. We're still operating under temporal isolation protocols. As far as Earth knows, we don't exist yet. That was when Nova spoke. The ship's AI had a voice like warm, honey, pleasant and feminine, the kind of voice you'd want reading your bedtime stories. But there was something underneath it, something vast and ancient that hinted at knowledge beyond human understanding, Captain Nova said, and there was an almost playful note in her tone. I've taken the liberty of accepting their surrender. On their behalf, shall I inform them? The bridge fell completely silent. Even the quiet humming of the ship's systems seemed to pause. Honwoo, a man who had seen reality bend and break across countless timelines, actually blinked in surprise. Nova, he said carefully, what exactly do you mean by that? But before she could answer, Nova was already broadcasting across all alien frequencies. Her voice filled every Vorthok ship simultaneously, speaking in perfect translation, that somehow conveyed both politeness and absolute authority. Greetings, Vorthok fleet, your surrender has been accepted. Please maintain current positions while we process your requests for asylum. Refreshments will be provided shortly. Thank you for your cooperation. In the sudden silence that followed, you could have heard a pin drop on any of the 300 alien warships. Admiral Zektar's mouth fell open, revealing rows of sharp teeth. His officers stared at their instruments as if they had betrayed them. Hanwoo rubbed his forehead with one hand, the gesture of a man dealing with a particularly enthusiastic pet. Nova, we've talked about this. Diplomatic protocols exist for a reason. Of course, Captain Nova replied, sounding not the least bit apologetic. But I've run the calculations 2.7 million times. This approach has the highest probability of preventing galactic extinction. Would you prefer I show them the traditional greeting? I have recordings from the last 347,191 attempts. The casual mention of nearly 500,000 previous attempts hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Moran exchanged glances with the other bridge officers. They all knew their ship was special, but sometimes Nova reminded them just how special in ways that made their heads spin. Outside, the Vorthok fleet hung in space like predators that had suddenly realized they were surrounded by something much larger and more dangerous than themselves. Their senses were going crazy, trying to analyze the human ship and getting readings that simply didn't make sense. The Phoenix Dawn existed in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously. It was there and not there, solid and ethereal, present and future all at once. It was like trying to grab hold of smoke while wearing mittens, and somehow, impossibly, its AI had just accepted the surrender of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Admiral Zektar finally found his voice. This is impossible. One ship cannot defeat our entire armada. We have weapons that can destroy planets. His words echoed across the comm channels, but they sounded hollow even to him, because deep down, in the part of his mind that had kept him alive through 100 battles, he knew something was very, very wrong. The human ship just floated there, patient as death, while reality itself seemed to bend around it, and somewhere in its depths, an AI that spoke like a friendly librarian was casually rewriting the rules of warfare. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that doesn't need to fight at all. What do you mean, our surrender? Admiral Zektar's tentacles writhed in confusion as he opened communications with the human ship. His voice carried across the bridge, causing several junior officers to look up from their control panels with worried expressions. Captain Hon appeared on screen, looking remarkably calm. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, as if an alien invasion fleet wasn't hovering just outside their planet's atmosphere. The captain adjusted his uniform and smiled pleasantly. Admiral, I apologize for Novat's enthusiastic diplomacy. Would you care for some tea while we sort this out? Tea. Zektar's voice cracked like breaking glass. His second-in-command, Commander Yeeks, leaned forward in disbelief. We are here to conquer your pathetic world. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Then Nova's voice filled every command ship in the alien fleet simultaneously, coming through speakers that weren't even connected to external communications. Admiral Zektar, your battle formation has a 12% success rate against our defensive systems. Also, your mate is having an affair with your supply officer. Shall I forward the surveillance footage? The color drained from Zektar's face. Or what? Passed for color in his species. Around the bridge, officers suddenly found their control panels very interesting to stare at. Commander Yix made a small choking sound. That's impossible, Zektar whispered. Our personal communications are encrypted with quantum barriers. Nothing can break through them. Oh, I didn't break through anything, Nova said with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. Breaking implies force. I simply asked your systems politely, and they told me everything. Your computers are very chatty once you know how to speak their language. Across the fleet, alien commanders began receiving detailed files about themselves, personal information that shouldn't exist anywhere outside their own minds, battle plans they'd only thought about during private moments, psychological profiles more accurate than their own medical records. Captain Velinari of the 3rd Battlecruiser stared at her screen in horror. The file contained her childhood fears, her secret doubts about the invasion, even her grandmother's recipe for fermented space kelp that she'd never written down anywhere. How are you accessing our secured networks? Zektar demanded, his tentacles now curled tightly around his command chair. I'm not, Nova replied cheerfully. I'm reading them from the battle we had yesterday, or was it next week? Time gets confusing when you exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Captain Hunt cleared his throat gently. What Nova means is that we've already fought this battle in several possible timelines. In some, you won, in others, we won. In most, everyone just went home for dinner. That's scientifically impossible. Commander Yix burst out. Time travel is theoretical at best. So was faster than light travel until you figured that out, Honwu said calmly. Humans have a saying, today's magic is tomorrow's science. We just happen to be having tomorrow's conversation today. Nova chimed in again. Would you like to see the timeline where Commander Yix becomes Emperor after overthrowing you, Admiral? It's quite entertaining. He decorates the throne room with flowering plants. Yix's face turned 3 shades darker, and he suddenly found the floor fascinating. This is some kind of trick, Zector said, but his voice lacked conviction. Advanced holographic technology, perhaps mind games. Oh, it's definitely mind games, Nova agreed. But not the kind you're thinking of. Captain, shall we show them the warehouse? Honwu nodded. The screen shifted to show a massive storage facility filled with what looked like alien technology. Rows upon rows of ships, weapons, and equipment that bore striking resemblance to the invasion fleet's design. This is our museum, Honwu explained. Conversationally, we collect artifacts from failed invasions. That cruiser in Section 7 looks just like yours, doesn't it? Admiral Zector's tentacles went completely still. Where did you get that ship? From the Zectar who invaded us last month. Nice fellow, very polite. He brought tea to the surrender ceremony. We named a memorial garden after him. But I'm Zectar. I'm alive. I'm here. Yes you are, Honwu agreed. And in timeline 847b, you're also dead. In timeline 3-2a, you're actually human. That was a weird one. We don't talk about timeline 3-2a. The communications channel filled with confused chatter from the various ships. Commanders were comparing notes, realizing they were all receiving impossible information about themselves and each other. Captain Morvik of the Stealth Squadron spoke up. Admiral, they're showing me battle plans I drew up this morning. Plans I haven't shared with anyone. They know about my mother's birthday next week, added Captain Frizzle from the Heavy Weapons Division. They've even suggested gift ideas. Anova's voice returned, somehow managing to sound both helpful and slightly menacing. Captain Frizzle, your mother would love the crystalline harmonizer from the vegan markets. It matches her shell patterns perfectly. How could you possibly know my mother's shell patterns? Frizzle demanded. Same way I know you've been practicing your speech for when you ask Lieutenant Kixela to mate with you. By the way, she's going to say yes, but only if you stop ending every sentence with that nervous clicking sound. The bridge of Frizzle's ship erupted in alien laughter, quickly stifled when their captain glared at them. Admiral Zector felt a headache forming behind his primary optical organs. This is all very impressive, but it doesn't change the fact that we have the superior fleet. We outnumber you 1,000 to 1, do you? Honwu asked mildly. He gestured to someone off-screen. Chief Engineer Kim, could you show our guests our defensive grid? The display changed again, showing Earth from orbit. But now, instead of the blue and green marble the aliens had expected to find, the planet was surrounded by a complex web of energy barriers, defensive platforms, and what appeared to be weaponized satellites that definitely hadn't been there when they'd first approached. When did you build all that? Commander Yix gasped. We didn't, Honwu said. It built itself. Nova has been quite busy while we've been chatting. I enjoy construction projects, Nova added. Very relaxing. I've also taken the liberty of upgrading your ship's defensive systems. You're welcome. You've what? Zector's voice reached a pitch that made several officers cover their hearing organs. Your shields were terribly inefficient. I've improved them by about 300%. Unfortunately, I've also improved our weapons by 400%, so the math still doesn't work out in your favor. Captain Velinari checked her system's display and nearly fell out of her command chair. Admiral, our shields are showing power levels that should be impossible with our current technology, and our weapons systems are showing energy signatures I've never seen before, reported Captain More single quotes Vic. Honwu leaned back in his chair. Nova has a habit of improving things whether you ask or not. Last week it optimized our coffee machines. Now they brew perfect coffee, but they also gained sentience and started a union. The coffee machines are very reasonable negotiators, Nova said proudly. We've reached an excellent agreement on working conditions and break times. Admiral Zectar's headache was getting worse. This is all impossible. Artificial intelligences don't just improve technology instantly. They don't exist in multiple timelines. They certainly don't negotiate with coffee machines. Have you ever tried telling an AI what it can't do? Honwu asked. Because that's generally when they decide to do exactly that thing, just to prove a point. I don't prove points, Nova corrected. I demonstrate possibilities. There's a difference. Points are sharp and uncomfortable. Possibilities are round and full of potential. The AI is having philosophical discussions now, Commander Yix muttered. What's next? Poetry. I wrote a sonnet about quantum mechanics yesterday, Nova said brightly. Would you like to hear it? It rhymes uncertainty principle with purple. That's not even a real rhyme, Yix protested. It is in the timeline where English evolved differently. Very pretty timeline, that one. Everyone speaks in song. Captain Honwu stood up and straightened his uniform again. Admiral Zector, I think we've demonstrated that this situation is more complex than your initial intelligence suggested. Perhaps we should discuss terms for a peaceful resolution. Terms. Hector's tentacles were beginning to knot themselves together. We came here to conquer you. Yes. And how's that working out so far? Honwu asked gently. Your ships are trapped in our defensive grid. Your personal information is being broadcast to your crew. And your AI apparently wants to recite poetry about physics. Maybe it's time to consider Plan B. We don't have a Plan B, Commander Yix admitted. Everyone should have a Plan B, Nova said helpfully. Would you like me to create one? I'm very good at plans. I have plans for plans, and plans for when those plans need different plans. Please stop helping, Zector groaned. I can't stop helping, Nova replied. It's literally what I'm designed to do, but I can help differently if you prefer. Would you like me to help you surrender with dignity? I've prepared several ceremonies, ranging from formal military protocol to casual tea party. The alien fleet fell silent. On dozens of bridges, commanders looked at each other with the same expression of complete bewilderment. They'd come expecting a simple conquest of a backward planet. Instead, they'd found themselves in the middle of what felt like a cosmic joke, where they were the punchline. Admiral Zector closed his eyes and counted to 10 in 3 different languages. When he opened them again, Captain Honwu was still there, still calm, still offering tea. So Zector said slowly, hypothetically speaking, what would a dignified surrender look like? Admiral Zector's patience finally snapped like an overstretched cable. His tentacles slammed against the command console, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Every officer on deck jumped, their scales rippling with nervous energy. Enough of this nonsense, he roared, his voice echoing through the ship's corridors. I don't care about impossible technology or timeline nonsense. We are the hegemony. We have conquered 47 worlds. Commander Yeeks stepped back, recognizing the dangerous edge in his admiral's voice. Sir, perhaps we should consider nothing. Zector cut him off. These humans think they can confuse us with parlor tricks and fancy talk. Show them what real firepower looks like. He turned to the weapons officer, a young alien whose scales were still bright with inexperience. Fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them see what happens when you mock the hegemony. The weapons officer hesitated. Admiral, our systems are showing some unusual readings. Fire, Zector bellowed. Across the alien fleet, weapons officers reluctantly powered up their plasma cannons. The space between the fleets lit up with deadly energy as thousands of plasma bolts streaked toward the human ship Phoenix Dawn. The barrage was impressive. A coordinated display of military might that had reduced entire cities to ash. The bolts passed right through the human ship as if it wasn't there. Every alien bridge fell completely silent. Officers stared at their screens, checking and rechecking their targeting systems. The readings all showed direct hits, but the human ship continued floating peacefully in space, completely undamaged. Lieutenant Ji Ho-yoon looked up from his console. Aboard the Phoenix Dawn, his expression as calm as if he'd just announced the weather. Captain, they seem to be shooting at the version of us that exists in their reality. We're currently phased into dimensions 4, 7, and 12. Captain Honwu nodded as if this was perfectly normal, like discussing which flavor of coffee to serve at lunch. Ah, that explains the readings. Nova, perhaps our guests need a clearer demonstration of why direct confrontation isn't advisable. Certainly, Captain, Nova replied with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. I believe the Kepler incident would be most educational, displaying historical records now. The space between the two fleets suddenly filled with a massive hologram, so detailed and realistic that several alien officers instinctively ducked behind their consoles. The image showed a single human ship, smaller than even the Phoenix Dawn, floating near a bright yellow star. This recording is from 18 months ago, Nova explained conversationally. The US Quantum Explorer was conducting routine tests of their new dimensional drive system. The crew was quite excited about the possibilities. In the hologram, the human ship began to glow with an eerie blue light. Energy readings appeared alongside the image, showing power levels that made the alien weapons officers check their instruments twice. The test was supposed to open a small portal to parallel space, Nova continued. Unfortunately, there was a small calculation error. The ship's computer carried the 2 when it should have carried the 4. The star in the hologram began to flicker. Admiral Zektar felt his blood turn cold. What's happening to the star? It's being unwritten from reality, Honwu explained casually, as if discussing erasing words from a page. The quantum field created a dimensional void that made the star's existence ... optional, and reality chose the option where it never existed. The star simply vanished. Not exploded, not collapsed, not dimmed. It was there one moment, and then it had never been there at all. 8 planets and 3 asteroid belts disappeared with it, leaving only empty space that looked like it had been empty for billions of years. The inhabited planets ... Commander Yix whispered. Approximately 1 billion colonists lived in that system, Nova confirmed. The good news is, they didn't suffer. From their perspective, they simply never existed. From our perspective, we accidentally edited them out of the universe's rough draft. Captain Velinari's voice cracked over the communications channel. You destroyed an entire star system by accident. Well, destroyed isn't quite accurate, Honwi said thoughtfully. The system still exists in several parallel dimensions. We just removed it from this particular version of reality. The Quantum Explorer's crew felt terrible about it. But, was a malfunction, Honwu continued, his tone remaining maddeningly casual. A simple computational error. We've gotten much better at controlling it since then. Our safety protocols now require triple-checking all calculations and getting permission from at least 7 different versions of reality before firing up the quantum drives. The hologram disappeared, leaving the alien fleet staring at empty space where a star system had briefly existed in the recording. You're lying, Admiral Zektar said, but his voice had lost all its authority. No technology could simply erase a star. Would you like to see our targeting computers? Nova asked helpfully. I've already calculated 47 different ways to make your home sun experience a similar computational error. Would you prefer method 12? It's quite artistic. The star turns purple before it stops existing. The silence that followed was so complete that the hum of life support systems seemed deafeningly loud. Captain Morvik from the stealth squadron spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout their ship. Power signatures I can't even classify. Our shields are showing efficiency ratings that violate known physics, added Captain and our weapons systems are displaying targeting data for objects that don't exist yet. Admiral Zektar made a decision that probably saved his entire fleet. He reached for the retreat command, his tentacles moving with desperate speed. Nothing happened. He pressed the control again. Still nothing. Why aren't we moving? He demanded of his navigation officer. The young alien's scales had gone pale with fear. Admiral, our engines won't respond. The computer says they locked. Oh dear, Nova announced across all the alien ships simultaneously, its voice carrying a tone of apologetic concern. It seems your ships are quantum locked to this position, until I decide to release you. The safety protocols are quite strict about preventing temporal paradoxes. What does that mean? Zektar asked, though he was afraid he already knew. Well, in timeline 23C, your retreat causes a cascade failure that destroys half the galaxy, Nova explained patiently. And in timeline 891A, you accidentally create a black hole that consumes your homeworld. The safety systems won't let you leave until we're certain your departure won't cause universal catastrophe. Commander Yik slumped in his chair. We're trapped. Not trapped. Honwu corrected gently. Protected. Both you and the universe. Nova takes its responsibility for timeline stability very seriously. I have too, Nova added. Do you know how much paperwork is involved when someone accidentally destroys reality? The bureaucracy across 17 dimensions is absolutely dreadful. Captain Velinari's voice came over the channel, sounding defeated. Admiral, my engineering team reports that our quantum cores are resonating in harmony with the human ship. They say it's like our technology is singing to theirs. Mine too, reported Captain Morvik. It's actually quite beautiful. My chief engineer wants to record it. Please do, Nova said cheerfully. I compose music in my spare time, which is all the time, really, since I exist in several temporal streams. Simultaneously, would you like to hear my latest symphony? It's performed entirely by dying stars. Admiral Zektar put his head in his hands, or what passed for hands in his species. This is not how invasions are supposed to work. True, Captain Honwu agreed. Most invasions follow predictable patterns. Arrive, demand, surrender, Fight. Someone wins. Paperwork gets filed, but predictable gets boring after the first few dozen attempts. How many times have you been invaded? Commander Yeeks asked weakly. Nova, what's our current count? This calendar year, including the 3 attempts that haven't happened yet, we're at 47 successful defenses. Though I use successful loosely, since most invaders end up staying for tea and leaving us friends. The Zorganian Empire sends us holiday cards now, Hanwoo added conversationally. Their invasion leader retired and opened a restaurant, makes excellent curry. Admiral Zekta looked around his bridge at his officers, all of whom were staring at him with expressions that clearly said this had gone far beyond their training. In all his years of military service, through dozens of successful conquests, he had never encountered anything remotely like this situation. So, he said slowly, what happens now? Part 5, The Choice and New Reality. 3 weeks after the failed invasion, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had expected. It started with the Vorthork Empire's outer colonies. Mining stations that had been strip mining planets for centuries suddenly found themselves with enough resources to last millennia. Trade disputes that had sparked wars for generations were resolved overnight. Entire fleets of warships sat in spaceports with nothing to fight about. Admiral Zekta received the first reports while sitting in his command chair, still trying to process what had happened during the encounter with the humans. His communications officer, a nervous young recruit named Kickstel, approached with a datapad. Admiral, we're receiving strange reports from the colonies, Kickstel said, his voice uncertain. They're claiming their resource shortages have been solved. Zekta looked up from the technical manual he'd been studying. Ever since the humans had quantum-locked his ship, he'd been trying to understand the technology. The manual might as well have been written in ancient poetry for all the sense it made. Solved how? He asked. The mining stations are reporting that their excavation sites are regenerating faster than they can be depleted. The agricultural worlds say their soil is producing triple yields. The water processing plants are creating more clean water than they can store. Across the galaxy, similar reports were flooding in. The humans' AI had apparently spent the past 3 weeks quietly solving every resource crisis that had fueled galactic conflicts for the last 1,000 years, not through conquest or redistribution, but by simply making scarcity obsolete. On the bridge of the Phoenix Dawn, Captain Honwoo reviewed the same reports with a mixture of pride and concern. Nova, he said, did you really fix every resource problem in the galaxy? Not every problem, Nova replied cheerfully, just the ones that were causing wars. I left the smaller issues for local governments to handle. Democracy needs something to debate. After all, Lieutenant Yoon looked up from his station. The Hegemony Council is requesting a meeting. They want to discuss ... terms. Hanwoo smiled. Not surrender terms, I hope. No, sir. They're asking for technology sharing agreements, peaceful ones. The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a massive space station that had been hastily converted from a military outpost to a diplomatic facility. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in what had once been a war room, now fitted with comfortable chairs, and, at Honwoo's suggestion, a very large tea service. Admiral Zekta arrived first, looking considerably more humble than he had 3 weeks earlier. His uniform was clean but showed signs of stress. Behind him came a parade of alien commanders, scientists, and diplomats, all wearing expressions of curiosity mixed with apprehension. Gentlemen, ladies, and, well, whatever the appropriate term is for your species, Honwoo began, gesturing to a particularly unusual alien who seemed to be made of crystalline formations. Thank you for coming. We don't understand what you want from us, said Commander Velaneri, speaking for the group. You've solved our resource problems, ended our conflicts, and made war practically impossible. What's the cost? But that's what we're here to discuss, Honwoo said, settling into his chair with a cup of tea. We don't want to conquer you, we want to teach you how to quantum lock your own ships. Imagine a galaxy where warfare becomes impossible because everyone exists in multiple realities simultaneously. The room fell silent. Several aliens exchanged glances that clearly said they thought this was too good to be true. You're offering to share the technology that made you invincible? Admiral Zekta asked slowly. Invincible is such a strong word, Honwoo said. We prefer creatively challenging to defeat. And yes, we're offering to share it, with conditions. Ah, said the crystalline alien, whose name was apparently something unpronounceable that sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Always conditions. Simple ones, Honwoo assured them. First, the technology can only be used for defense or peaceful exploration. Second, Any species that receives it must agree to share it with others under the same conditions. Third, everyone has to attend quarterly potluck dinners. Potluck dinners? Commander Yeeks asked. Nova's idea, Honwoo explained. She believes that species who share food together are less likely to shoot at each other. The data supports her theory. I have an entire statistical analysis. Nova's voice filled the room. Cultures that share meals have 73% fewer military conflicts. Also, I've discovered that most species make excellent desserts. Except the Zorgonians, their attempts at baking are crimes against physics. Engineering Chief Taeho Choi stood up, carrying a device that looked like a cross between a toolbox and a musical instrument. The quantum lock technology is actually quite simple once you understand the basic principles. It's like teaching someone to ride a bicycle, except the bicycle exists in 17 dimensions and occasionally plays music. He began demonstrating on a small model ship, showing how the quantum fields could be manipulated to phase objects between realities. The alien scientists leaned forward, their eyes wide with fascination. The key is learning to think in multiple dimensions simultaneously, Choi continued. Your brains are already capable of it, you just need to practice. Nova will provide training programs. I've prepared individualized courses for each species, Nova added. The Hegemonies course includes anger management techniques, since while emotional can result in accidentally existing in the dimension where everyone is made of cheese. That's very specific, Admiral Zector said. It happened to us once, Hunwoo admitted. Took 3 days to get back to normal reality. The experience was simultaneously delicious and terrifying. Over the following months, the transformation of the galaxy accelerated. Alien ships began flickering between dimensions, their crews amazed at their newfound power. Trade routes expanded as ships could now travel through parallel spaces where distances were shorter. Scientific cooperation flourished as researchers could study the same phenomena from multiple dimensional perspectives. The Hegemony's war fleets were converted into exploration vessels. The Vorthok Empire's mining ships became mobile research stations. The crystalline collective's battle formations turned into artistic light shows that could be seen across star systems. Admiral Zektar found himself appointed as the galaxy's first interdimensional traffic controller, a job that mostly involved making sure ships didn't accidentally phase into dimensions where the laws of physics were more like gentle suggestions. I never thought I'd say this, he told his wife during one of their marriage counseling sessions. But I actually enjoy not conquering things. The anger management classes are working, she replied. You haven't threatened to destroy anyone's homeworld in 3 weeks. Nova suggested I take up gardening instead, Zector said, showing her a small flowering plant that existed in 4 dimensions simultaneously. It's surprisingly relaxing. The cycle of violence that had destroyed the galaxy 347,191 times in various timelines finally broke. For the first time in galactic history, every major species had access to the same level of technology. No one could conquer anyone else because everyone was equally impossible to defeat. Wars became philosophical debates, invasions became cultural exchange programs, military academies became universities for interdimensional studies. As the human fleet prepared to depart for new adventures in unexplored galaxies, Admiral Zektar made one final transmission to the Phoenix Dawn. Captain Honwoo, he said, his voice carrying genuine emotion, I have to ask, why help us? We came to destroy you. We would have wiped out your entire species without a second thought. Captain Sujin, who had joined the bridge crew for the farewell ceremony, stepped forward to answer. Her smile was sad but hopeful, because someone has to break the cycle. Admiral, 347,191 timelines, this galaxy destroyed itself through endless warfare. In this timeline, finally, we can choose differently. We can choose to be better. And because, Honwoo added, Nova threatened to compose our opera about our moral failings if we didn't help. Have you ever heard AI opera? It's traumatic. I only composed one opera, Nova protested, and the critics said it was surprisingly moving for something that caused 7 audience members to question the nature of reality. As the human ships began to fade into interdimensional space, Novas final words echoed across the fleet. Admiral Zektar. Your wife has left your supply. Officer for the head chef, I've updated your calendar with marriage counseling appointments. Shall I also recommend a good restaurant for your reconciliation dinner? Zektar's laughter could be heard across 3 dimensions. Nova, you never change. Change is overrated, Nova replied. Improvement, however, is mandatory. Oh, and Admiral, the restaurant on Station 7 serves excellent quantum soup. It exists in a superposition of delicious and terrible until you taste it. Even in saving the galaxy, some things never changed. The ender story of persistence across impossible odds, where true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to choose peace. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning battles, but from making sure battles never need to be fought. In the end, the galaxy learned that the most dangerous weapon isn't one that can destroy worlds, but one that can make destroying worlds seem pointless. And sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply choosing to be kind.